Today is April 5th, 2014, and my name is Peg Brown. I am interviewing Art Trevino at his home in Longmont. This interview is being recorded for the Maria Rogers Oral History Program, the Flood Interview Project, and filmed by Anne Marie Poise. So, Art, let's start at the very beginning. I'd like to ask where you were born.
I was born in a little town called Edinburgh, Texas, which is in the southern tip of the state. 1950. Edinburgh is probably about 20 miles north of the Mexican border. My parents, my last name is Trevino, and my dad was born in Monterrey, Mexico. His father, Samuel Trevino, was the Mexican consulate president or director in Texas, and they moved to Edinburgh back in the 1930s. My dad had a brother, a younger brother. They both opened up a store, a grocery store, called it the Valley Store there in Edinburgh. And it's interesting, my dad and my brother both met my mom and my dad's brother's wife, who happened to be sisters, in Edinburgh, and they got married there and raised a family. I'm a family of two other brothers, older brothers, and an older sister. Went to high school there and graduated. Went to 2 years of college at Pan American University there in Edinburgh, and then went to the University of Texas in Austin for 3 more years, and graduated there. I had a cousin who was the son of my dad's brother that was living in Colorado at the time when I graduated, and living in Edinburgh and Texas for 20-something years. I had grown bored of it because I had never done any traveling or gone anywhere else. So I hopped in my car and drove up to Denver to meet my cousin, and when I came into the Boulder area, I came down 36 and came over that hill, and I looked at Boulder and I said, wow, this is beautiful, this is fantastic, I'm going to do everything I can to move here. And you know, I had graduated with a degree in advertising, but also I had a minor in photography. So I started looking around, and at that time there was no Craigslist. This was back in 1974. So I checked the local Daily Camera newspapers and the want ads. Found an ad from an artist who was living out of his home in Boulder, and he was looking for a photographer to run his lab. Because he was doing a lot of graphic arts and designs, and he needed someone to develop all the negatives and print all the pictures. And so I met him, talked to him, and he hired me right on the spot. So at the time I didn't have anything with me but my clothes, so I had to drive all the way back to Austin to gather all my gear, and loaded up my car and drove right back. And what was also fortunate was that he had a room for rent. So I didn't have to look very long. I didn't have to pay rent because that came out of my salary. So I had a place to live, and work was downstairs in the basement. So I was very fortunate. It worked out very well.
That's great.
Yeah. So I lived in the Boulder area for about 10 years. I met my wife in 1978. We got married a couple of years later. And in 1980 is when we got married. In and we moved around. We were renting houses at the time. And then 1983, we were living out on a farm out east of Boulder, near Louisville, 40-acre ranch. It was basically a converted trailer that had a full basement that was not finished. And so it was me, my wife, and another roommate, a hairdresser. And while my wife was pregnant, my sister came out to stay with us for a little while. My son was born in 1983 at Boulder Community Hospital. And then 1984, we were broke, didn't have any money, so my wife's parents lived in West Palm Beach at the time, told us to pack up your stuff, move out, live with them, till we can get back out on our feet. And we had a grandchild for them. They wanted to see the baby, so we ended up living there, and we never left. In 1984, we moved there and never left. So 4 or 5 years ago, her father died, and then a couple of years ago, her mom died. So I asked my wife, I said, "You want to move back to Colorado?" And she said, "Absolutely, let's go." And so back in June last year, 2013, we moved back to Longmont, found a house on Craigslist, and that was very fortunate. We've been very lucky finding things on Craigslist.
Was that the house where you're living now?
This is where we live now, yeah. We found this house on Craigslist. Sight unseen. I hadn't even seen it. He just sent, landlord sent me pictures, and I spoke to him many times on the phone. So I just, through faith, sent him a deposit to hold the house, and the basement wasn't even finished at the time. He was finishing that up with his girlfriend and another couple of guys that were helping him do it, and he was sending me pictures as the progress went on. So the end of May, I packed up a big budget 17-foot truck with all of our furniture, and we moved out. Took us 3 days to get here.
Long drive.
I stopped in, let's see where we stopped. We stopped in Mississippi, Alabama, spent the night, drove to Dallas where my sister lives, spent the night with them. We actually spent a day with them. And then from Dallas to here, we drove nonstop. It was about a 12-hour trip, and got in late at night, and then the landlord was here to meet me.
Oh, nice.
Brought me in the house, showed me the house, and we've been here ever since.
That's great. Where does your landlord live?
He lives in East Boulder.
Okay.
Right outside of Louisville.
Okay.
Got a big house there.
Okay.
So,
and then you got a job here after you moved out here?
No, I had been working with Bed Bath & Beyond since 2003, down in the West Palm Beach area. I was there. And when we decided we wanted to move, I asked my HR person if it would be okay if I transferred, could they find me a position up here in the area. And so they were able to find me an opening. So they didn't pay my moving expenses, but they said, "You have a job if you want to take it." And I said, "Absolutely." So that worked out pretty well.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah.
So who was living in your house in September before the flood? You could just tell us who they, including
Sure.
animals and all of that.
Absolutely. Well, I'll give you a background. My wife and I have been married. My wife's name is Susan, and we have been married since 1984, or excuse me, 1980. And so we've been married almost 34 years. It's actually 33. Anniversary is Christmas Eve.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Several years ago, Susan was having some issues with driving, having some issues with speech, having some issues with short-term memory. So we took her to a neurologist, and they kind of diagnosed her with pre-Alzheimer's. She couldn't speak in complete sentences. If I held something up and showed it to her and said, "What is this?" Let's say it was a pen. She knew what it was, but she couldn't say the word pen. And to ask for something, she would say things like, "over there," or "that thing," or she couldn't say, "Well, I'd like a sandwich," or if you asked her, "Would you like something to eat?" she could say yes and no. And she could string together a few words, but not a complete sentence. So we ran her through a lot of tests, a lot of MRIs. She was involved in a research program testing an experimental drug down in Florida, and getting MRIs every 6 months. So they did notice that there was some deterioration in the frontal lobe of her brain, which is where Alzheimer's affects people. Affects their short-term memory, affects their speech. But it was interesting because I could ask her about things that happened 30 years ago, and she could remember them vividly. But I would ask her, "What'd you have to eat for lunch today?" She could remember. But we decided at the time when we wanted to move, it was a situation where she needed someone with her. She needs help dressing, she needs help going to the bathroom, she needs help bathing. She can't cook her own meals, so we have to cook for her. But she can eat normally, and she can go to the bathroom normally. She just needs help, sitting down and wiping herself and things like that. So my son, David, who's 25 now, he was born in 1988, many years ago had picked up the guitar. I played guitar, taught him how to play guitar. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, he met a friend, native Hawaiian, and his name was Dave also. He was about my age. He was living in West Palm Beach at the time. He was an executive chef, and he played the ukulele. So he taught Dave, we call him Dave, his nickname is Ukulele Dave. He taught him to play ukulele, and so now my son Dave has been playing ukulele for about 5 years, and he's gotten very, very good. So not too many ukulele players or musicians living in West Palm Beach area. He had all his friends down there, but they weren't musicians. So I said, "Listen, let's move to Boulder. If you move to Boulder and take care of Susan, your mom, and let me continue to keep on working, that'll save me a lot of money, not having to hire someone to take care of her while I'm at work. And the Boulder, Longmont, Denver area is just full of musicians, and you will not have any problem finding people of like mind. And there's concerts every day there, especially during the summer." I said, "You're going to love it here." And he had only been to Boulder one time on a ski trip when we came, Innishoalden in Boulder. So he was very familiar. He had never been to the Longmont area, and so he said, "Let's go." So he committed to, take care of Susan so I could continue to work. And once we got to Longmont, he went to the Dickens Opera House. They have an open mic every Thursday, and so he started playing live music in front of a small audience. It's never really a big audience, but he's gotten the experience, and he wants to start playing at downtown Longmont during the summer because they have live musicians. Boulder has live musicians right there on the mall, and he's met some musicians locally, and they're going to start doing some clubs and things. So basically, David's been a lifesaver for me because he's been able to take care of Susan.
Yeah.
So
So that's worked out well then.
That's worked out fantastic.
I think you mentioned you had a couple of cats too.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have 3 cats.
Mm-hmm.
2 older cats that are 16 years old, and then I have a younger cat that David picked up when he was living in Orlando. It was just a stray cat out on the street. It was a kitten. So that cat's about 2 years old now.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for that. That's your household.
Right.
And so here we are, a week before the St. Vrain River smacks into this part of Longmont, and it's starting to rain, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you could describe in as much detail as possible your memories of the flood, starting with your first inkling or your first knowledge of it and so on.
Sure. Well, I believe it happened on a Thursday, September 12th, and it just so happened that Thursday I had to go to an HR meeting. Part of human resources with our company is that federal mandate came down several years ago that any corporation over a certain number of people was required by law to have these mandatory meetings to go over sexual issues and things you can do and things you can say in the workplace. You want to make sure that nobody feels threatened with their job, either from people that work there or managers or vendors. So every year we have to go to this HR workshop, and usually the workshop is all day. So that particular day, I was scheduled to go to this workshop in Westminster at the La Quinta Hotel in one of their little banquet rooms. So I was there. I got there at 8 in the morning, and it was raining. It was already starting to rain. And I take Hover Road over to Pike, and then from Pike I go over to 287, and Highway 287 is a straight shot all the way to Westminster. Excuse me. So as I was traveling down 287, once I started going south on Longmont, I could see the water starting to build up on the farmlands. And then they're just past, I think it's Isabel or Lookout, there's a hill that goes down to a creek area, and I noticed that creek was pretty full, and all the water around the creek was, I could see it was starting to flood out way over the banks of the creek. So that was my first inclination that we were going to be getting some serious floodwaters. So as I got into Westminster, I went to the meeting. We were taking breaks every couple hours. It was still raining. It wasn't raining hard, but I could tell it was raining. So around 12 o'clock, I got a call from my son, David. And he said, "Dad, we're starting to get water in the basement." I said, "What do you mean we're getting water in the basement?" He said, "It's coming in." I said, "Well, is it coming in from the outside? Are we getting water into the outside of the house?" He says, "No, it's dry outside. I think it's coming in through the sewer. Because over by the furnace, there's a drain there. And we had all wood floors." And I said, "Well, is it coming in pretty hard?" And he said, "Yeah, it's coming in pretty good." I said, "Well, there's a sump pump a few feet away from there. Is that working?" He said, "Yeah, I can hear the sump pump working." I said, "Well, no big deal. As long as the sump pump's working, we should be okay. It's going to ruin the floors, but no big deal." So, I was concerned, but I figured with the electricity still on, the sump pump working, wasn't going to be a problem. Well, around 2:30, 3 o'clock, he calls me back, says, "Dad, the power just went off." I said, "Oh, crap." I said, "That's not good, because now there's no place for the water to go." So I said, "Listen, I'm gonna leave the meeting. I'm gonna tell my HR person what's going on, and I'm gonna get there as soon as I can." Normally the drive takes about 35 minutes. So I talked to my HR manager. I said, "Listen, I have an emergency. Water's coming in my basement, starting to flood, the power's off. My son's there. My wife has Alzheimer's. I need to be there. I said, take off, go. You know, you got to do what you got to do. So as I was coming back up 287, as I got into Longmont, I could see the lights flashing, the emergency lights. And they had already blocked the road at Pike. Normally I would go west on Pike over to Hover. So I couldn't get over to Hover. So I backtracked. I came back to 52, and I was able to take, I think it's 95th Street, which goes into Hover. And as I started to get past the shopping centers, past 119, I could see that road right after Home Depot was blocked. The water had started to come there. They weren't letting any people over that road. And I said, oh crap, now what am I going to do? Because that was the only way to get over to my subdivision. Mm-hmm. So I took Nelson over to Airport Road. Airport was blocked. I said, now what am I going to do? How am I going to get over here? Because the bridge going over Airport was blocked, and that water was backed up. So I said, all right, I'm going to be smart. I'm going to go all the way up to 36, or the peak-to-peak road, come in over Lyons that way, because there's, I said, well, first I tried going through some roads off of Nelson, and I tried to hit north, and every time I hit north there was an obstruction there. Any bridge going over the St. Vrain was shut down by a sheriff or somebody. So I said, well, it's a little bit higher up near Peak to Peak. Maybe I can get over that bridge. So I got to Peak, went north, and as soon as I got to the bridge that crossed over St. Vrain, police cars. And I could see the water was just raging. I mean, it was just raging. I said, oh gosh.
Was the bridge still intact at that
The bridge
point?
was still intact.
What time of day?
This was probably around 4:30 now.
Oh, okay.
Because it had taken me an hour to make all these side trips to try to get over the St. Vrain. There's no way I was getting over.
And it's raining.
And it's raining. It's not raining hard, but it is raining. Okay. So, crap, now what am I going to do? So I took Nelson all the way back. I said, well, my only other option is to try to go east as far as I can and get over to I-25, because I figured, well, I-25 is a major road, and the bridges going over the St. Vrain are really tall. They're not going to shut down I-25. So I had to go south quite a ways, and 52 was closed to 25. They had already blocked that. So I found a little side street. I don't remember if it was Isabel or if it was Lookout or whatever. And it was a dirt road, and they hadn't shut that down. So I had to drive through some water, and I was able to get over to the I-25 side street, whatever they call that access road that runs along I-25. And I was able to go underneath I-25, get on the access road, and you could see the cars were backing up. So rather than get on I-25, I continued on the access roads till I got all the way to 66, which is Ute Highway. And it was all stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. There was already traffic piled up, and it was still raining. And this was like probably 6 o'clock. And my cell phone was starting to die. And that was the only way I could communicate with my son. And he had a cell phone too, but he had a charger for the car. So the batteries in the cars were still working, so he was able to keep his cell phone going. But I didn't have a car charger. So once I finally got into Longmont, and I got over to Hover, and I got over to that, I wish I could remember the names of these streets, but there is a street that runs north and south that's east of the Twin Peaks golf course. I could see that Hover was blocked because it was underwater, and the police were not letting anybody through. They were starting to evacuate people. So I was telling my son, listen, I have no way to get over to the house because they won't let me drive in because the street's under 3 feet of water. So I said, listen, you're not going to hear from me. I'm going to go over to the Walmart and see if I can pick up a cell phone charger. And that way I can at least continue to communicate with you guys. Well, it was starting to get dark. This was probably around 6:30. It was cloudy, it was still raining. So I went over to Walmart and I told my son, looks like I'm going to have to spend the night in the car, until they can get me over. So I had the cell phone charger, my phone was working, and I said, are you okay? Are you and Mom are okay? And you got plenty of food, you got candles, because there was no electricity. I said, you guys are going to be okay? And he said, yeah, we'll be fine. We have stuff to eat. So I said, listen, I got to figure out some way to get over to you. So I went over, I parked my car on the side of the road by the golf course, because that was elevated, that was on a hill, and it was dry. And I got out and walked over to the policemen that were there. I said, listen, my wife has Alzheimer's. My son is there alone. I need to get to them somehow. He says, we're not taking people in. I said, listen, I have to get over there. So look, I understand your situation. There's a unit, a rescue unit that has a little John boat. Maybe if you talk to them, I can't promise you anything, but if you talk to them, maybe they'll take you over and get you into the development. So I waited probably about an hour because they were bringing people back and forth on this John boat. And so I talked to the guy. He was very nice people. And that's one thing I want to mention is everybody was so nice and so helpful. So anyway, hang on, it's a little emotional. So
Of course.
okay, so the guy shows up with there's two guys, and they're all decked in paramilitary outfits with wetsuits on, because it was cold, it was starting to get cold, the water was really cold. And I talked to him and I explained my situation. I said, I got to get back to the wife. And he said, okay, don't tell anybody we did this, but we'll go ahead and take you across. He said, you're going to have to take your shoes off, because I had to wade in water, probably a couple of feet deep just to get to the boat. Because they had a motor on it and they couldn't, get the boat too close, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to use the motor. So he said, get your stuff, jump in the boat, put this life jacket on for safety. I said, no problem. So, they put me in the boat. I tell you, it was like 4 feet of water, so there was no problem for the boat, taking me over to the fence line at the end of the golf course. And they let me off there, and
It's dark, right?
it was dark. Mm-hmm. They had a flashlight, and actually I had bought a flashlight, so I had one with me. So once they let me out, I said, good luck. Try to get your wife and family out of here, because we're evacuating. So once I got there and I came down and I saw the water, I said, oh my God. You could see there's a light switch at the bottom of the basement, and the water was above the light switch. I said, well, there's got to be at least 4 feet of water there. So we were trying to figure out what to do next, and my son has a friend who lives at the apartments at the top of the hill over there off of 9th Street. So I said, listen, your friend, said you could come over and spend the night with him. That's not a problem. Not enough room for all three of us. I said, Mom and I are good. We'll just spend the night and see what happens in the morning. So you go ahead and evacuate. And so he went ahead and packed up his gear, and he evacuated. And I said, you stay with him, and then Mom and I will figure out what we need to do. So this was like probably 10 o'clock at night. So my wife and I ended up spending the night here, and my thinking was, listen, we got food, we're warm, we're dry, the floodwaters had not come up to our house, and it was just the basement that was underwater, and everything in the basement was floating. All the furniture and the TVs and the beds were all just floating in the water. I said, there's nothing we can do. We're not in any danger of water coming into the main part of the house. So we'll just spend the night and see what, Friday brings. Well, Friday, I think it was still raining on Friday. So by then, our cars were in the, I had another car. I had a little Hyundai that was in the garage, and my truck was parked outside the neighborhood. So I think we stayed the night. We stayed all day Saturday. They were still evacuating people, and they were saying, listen, we can't be responsible if something happens to you. I said, what's going to happen? The water had stopped. The water was not getting into the house. It was just water in the basement. What's going to happen to us? And so we stayed one more night. And then Saturday, the water had started to recede. And in the meantime, I rent this house. My landlord was out of town. He was on a trip out to Oregon in his motorhome with his girlfriend. It was a trip that he had been planning for several years. And I told him, listen, there's no reason for you to get back. He said, well, what do you need? What do you need? I said, well, it'd be nice to have some sort of electrical device, a generator. And if you could somehow get me a sump pump to start pumping the water out, we can start doing that. So he got a hold of a friend of his that had a generator and had a small sump pump. But they weren't letting anybody into the neighborhood was the problem. So he had no way to get the generator to me. So this was Saturday, I think. We had spent another night, Friday night here. And then Saturday, the water had started to recede. So the street, 9th Street, going out to Airport, they had started to let people out. They weren't letting people in. So I said, all right, well, we got to leave. We got to get some groceries, get some food. And so I packed up some clothes, and my wife and I decided to hop in the car, and we were going to go out to the grocery store and get some groceries. Well, as we were leaving, the police were there. They were keeping people from coming in. I talked to a policeman, real nice guy, an older guy, and I said, listen, we want to leave. We can get across the railroad tracks. It's safe. And I said, we want to get some groceries. And I said, is that okay? And he said, yeah, that's fine. And what's ironic is as we went out and I got some groceries, when we came back in, the guy said, you can't come back in here. I said, wait a minute, what do you mean I can't come back in? I said, we're letting people out, but we're not letting them in. I said, well, why didn't you tell me that when I left? Otherwise I wouldn't have left. And he said, well, it's people. He started being real belligerent, real angry. And I said, it's people like you staying here that causes us to have problems. And I said, wait a minute. If you had just told me that we couldn't leave, we wouldn't have left. All right, we would have stayed. We were safe. We were comfortable. We had food. But now you're telling me I can't get back in? He said, that's right. And so he was being real nasty. I said, oh, come on, there's no reason to be rude and angry. And so I had to turn around and I had to go back out. So now I said, what are we going to do now? So I had to shell out $150 to get a hotel room over at the Holiday Inn. And the Holiday Inn was packed. They had one more room left, so they had room for me. And so we ended up spending 2 nights there. And then I think it was Sunday or Monday morning before the National Guard actually let us start getting back in, because by then the waters had receded and they were starting to let people back in the back way. 9th Street was still blocked because there was still water. But coming through airport in 9th, they were letting people in. So I was concerned about the kitty cats because they didn't have any food, but you know, cats can live several days without food, so that wasn't a big deal. And so we had our groceries and we came back in. There was still no power when we were able to get back in. And by, I think Monday was when all the road crews started coming in. The city came in. They were able to get power back on, I think Monday night. I don't remember the exact days. It was either Monday night or Tuesday morning. Because what had happened is all the power boxes are underground in this neighborhood. They call them vaults. And the vaults were all full of water. So they had to drain all the vaults out before they could bring power back to the houses. And my boss's friend was able to get in. We got the generator going. And we got the water pumping out. And by then all the neighbors had their generators going, and they had hired crews to come in to help, you know, pump out water. And the city officials were bringing in emergency crews. And all these volunteer organizations were starting to come into the houses too, and starting to clean up. It took a good 36 hours before I was able to get all the water out of the house. And once we were able to get the water out, then my son and I started, vacuuming. I went to Home Depot and bought a wet vac and mops and shovels and bleach and stuff that I knew that I was going to need to clean up the basement. And my next door neighbor had hired some Mexican laborers to help get his stuff out of the basement. So I was able to hire them, pay them a few bucks to help get the heavy waterlogged furniture that David and I couldn't get out. That stuff was really, really heavy. I had some leather couches down here, and I had beds down here, and had all kinds of furniture and desks, and they helped me, you know, drag the stuff up the floors to get it all out.
And you lost most of that, didn't you?
I lost all of it. Yeah, it was all gone.
Yeah.
So the timeline after that was, I guess it was probably not till the Wednesday, which was almost a week later, before David and I actually started the cleanup. And my landlord was on the phone constantly with me. He was still up in Oregon. And he had a son going to school up in Fort Collins. I said, listen, I'm going to send my son down to help you guys, you know, because we had to cut out all the wallboard. We had to take up all the wood flooring. And he said, I'm going to send him, you know, to help you. And I think that was on a Thursday. He showed up. They were letting people in. And it took us a whole day to cut out all the wallboard, get all the wood out. We lost the water heater because that was gas. It was full of mud. The furnace we didn't touch because that was too mechanical for me. But I said, listen, I need hot water, and I got to be able to take a hot shower. Yeah. I didn't want to take cold showers. And it had been, you know, 4 or 5 days since we'd had a shower since the hotel. So I called my landlord, said, I'm going to go to Home Depot. I'm going to buy a new hot water heater. And I have the next door neighbor who's mechanical. He said he'll help me put it in. And he said, fine, do it. He said, I'll pay for it. So I was able to get a hot water heater from Home Depot. He came in, we hooked it up, we got it going. And so on Thursday night we had our first hot shower upstairs. And by then we had plugged all the drains so that the sewer wouldn't back up anymore, and the city had their sewer system back online. So we were concerned that if we took a shower, would all that water come back, up through the basement. So, but that sewer was working fine by then, and it was just a matter of 2 days where we were able to get all the drywall out, all the wood out, all the furniture out, everything that was down here.
Quite amazing. You must have been pretty exhausted.
We were pretty exhausted, yeah. But what was really cool is there, you have all this drywall and mud on the floor, as you well know from your experience with your house. I was thinking, well, how am I going to get all this drywall mud? Because drywall, when it's water, it turns to mud. How am I going to get this all about? All of a sudden I get this knock on the door, and there's this crew. Damn, I wish I could remember their name. But they were voluntary ex-military people. They probably came through your neighborhood.
Yeah, I think I remember them actually.
They said, hey, we'll come and help clean up your house for you. And I said, well, how much is it going to cost me? And he said, nothing. I said, what do you mean nothing? So we're a voluntary organization. We're I think they were out of Michigan. And says, this is what we do. Anytime there's a disaster or a catastrophe, whether it's from tornadoes or floods or fires or whatever, we come in, we're all ex-military people, and we're all volunteers, and that's what we do. We provide the equipment, we provide the pressure washers and cleaners. And I said, we'll come and do your house for free. I said, you're kidding? He said, no, absolutely free. So I said, well, okay, what's the name of your organization? He said, all we ask is that, you go on our website and make a voluntary donation, whatever you can afford. I said, hey, that's no problem. My landlord would be happy to give you a donation. I said, fine. So he made an appointment, and they came in the next morning, and there must have been 10 of them down here, just pressure washing all the floors, vacuuming all the water out. I said, man, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
So when they were done, they were here for about 4 hours.
Wow.
The place was spotless. I said, oh my God, that's unbelievable.
That's great.
So the only issue was the framing had to dry out. So I went to Home Depot and bought like 4 or 5 box fans. And everybody said you need to spray down everything with bleach to kill all the sewer bacteria that's down here. Spray it all down, and get an anti-mold chemical and spray that all down. Spray all the wood down. Not so much with the concrete, but spray all the anything that's wood that's going to absorb moisture. That'll keep mold from growing down here. And just leave the fans running for 24 hours a day until everything dries out. And then I think it wasn't until the end of October, near the end of October, before my landlord finally came back from his trip.
Oh my, he was lucky to have you do all this hard work.
Oh yeah, well, he was the best landlord I've ever had. He, once he saw how much time and energy and how much money it spent, he paid me for all the time and labor.
Good.
Because he knew he could write it off on the rental. So he paid me, gave me a 1099 as a subcontractor. Paid me and David for the time and work.
Good.
I said, yeah, because otherwise you would have, to have somebody else come in and do this, it would have cost you $4,000 or $5,000 easily, just in labor alone. Because I asked all the neighbors, what are you paying to have these Serve Pros and all these disaster relief people to come in? Oh, it's $4,000 to $5,000. I said, wow. So, but the issue was trying to get here, being stuck, not being able, to be with the family. That was probably the hardest thing to deal with. The physical stuff, that's physical stuff. It's not emotional. And then having to deal with the issues of cleaning up and all that. That's just physical stuff, no big deal. But what was so cool was I didn't know any of these people in this neighborhood, but this actually brought us all together, and now I know who everybody is. I know, we all wave to each other now every day. It's ironic that it took a major disaster like this, to bring everybody together. Oh, and another thing I wanted to mention, I lived in Florida for 30 years, went through 4 hurricanes, and never had an issue with flooding. We had issues with wind damage, and storm damage and down trees, and there was a time in 2006, I think, where we lived in West Palm Beach, we had back-to-back hurricanes. A hurricane hit, 2 weeks later, another hurricane hit. So there was an issue where we were without power for 3 weeks, and that was horrible. No hot water, no AC. In Florida, temperature in the 80s, you couldn't sleep at night because it was so hot. But never did I have a flood problem. And I'm here in Longmont, Colorado for 4 months, and my house gets flooded. So that was very ironic. Very ironic.
It is.
Yeah, and when we first moved here in June, they had the issue with the fires down in Colorado Springs. We didn't have fire issues down in Florida.
Yeah.
We were always worried about a major hurricane coming in, because I lived right on the coast, and with the storm surge, because we were at like 1 or 2 feet above sea level where we lived. We had a barrier island, Palm Beach, which protected us in the mainland, but it wouldn't take much. All it would take would be a 20-foot wall of water to come in, and all our neighborhoods would have been underwater. Never happened.
It's odd that what you fear or anticipate doesn't happen, and what you can't, even in your wildest dreams, imagine, then does happen.
Exactly.
What did your neighborhood look like, the week after? I mean, I know in our neighborhood there were huge mounds of material and drywall, furniture, mattresses that were being piled up.
Absolutely. Well, same thing here. Every house in this neighborhood, basement got flooded. And so through communication with the city was very good about, communicating with everybody and letting them know what to do with their trash and stuff. First they said, don't put it in the street, because they wanted to make sure that, the emergency vehicles and utility vehicles could get in and out. But then once they realized there wasn't enough room in driveways for everybody to put their stuff out, they said, go ahead and put it on the street, right in front of your house, and try to keep it in mounds, so that, when the big front end loaders and the bobcats come in with the dump trucks and stuff, they can have access to it. And then they had the big shovels come in and grab stuff and load. But every single house was a mess. It was just a mess. It looked like a war zone.
It did, didn't it?
It did.
It felt like it in the city. There were helicopters flying overhead.
Yes.
And there were big National Guard vehicles, and the city was great, though, and they continued to do cleanup for months after.
For months, exactly.
It was great. So as you gradually move stuff out.
Yeah, they would bring in these big trash bins. I forget what they call them, but those would fill up quickly. So, and then they had the haulers coming in and just taking, dump bins full of stuff like every hour on the hour. It was amazing how efficient they were.
Did you have recoveries as far as, there's the physical recovery of putting drywall back and so on, but did you also have sort of aftermath recovery of realizing you were tired, or that you had been through more stress than you'd realized, or?
Well, I wanted to mention too that my job, my company, Bed Bath & Beyond, were very supportive and very helpful in making sure that I was taken care of.
Good.
I've been with them for about 8 years now. And normally, the way it works on vacation and sick days and, paid holidays and whatnot, if you're with them for 5 years, you get 2 weeks paid vacation. From 5 to 10 years, you get 3 weeks. And then after 10 years of being with them, they give you 4 weeks paid vacation. And then you get your normal sick days. You get 1 sick day a month. And then you have your paid holidays. So I'm thinking in my head, now wait a minute. I had no vacation time left. I had used my 3 weeks. I said, really, all I had left was my sick days. And my holidays. I had some few days. So I was in contact with my work and I was letting them know, listen, I'm not going to be into work for a couple of weeks because I got to get all this mess cleaned up. And I was thinking, man, I'm going to lose a lot of money here being without work. So they went, and I asked them, I said, do I get paid my sick days even though I'm not sick? And the initial response from my local HR guy was, no, you don't get paid. It's a sick day. I said, well, damn. So I wasn't the only one in this situation. There was a lot of Bed Bath & Beyond employees in the same situation. So corporate got together with all the HR people and said, look, we need to help these people out. So I get a call back. I said, listen, we're going to take care of you. However long it takes for you, to clean up your house, we're going to pay you. I said, oh, man, that's fantastic.
Means
so I didn't lose any
shop
income. So that was, mentally, that was probably more stressful than the physical. I said, how am I going to afford to pay for all this stuff? I can't be out of work for 2 weeks and I get paid. So they relieved that stress.
Good.
Physically, sure, it was stressful. We were exhausted every night when we went to bed. But, thank God for my son because, he's not lazy at all. He said, come on, let's do this. I'll help watch mom, I'll help whatever physical. He had never done anything physical like manual labor. I'd done manual labor my whole life. It's no big deal. And I'm pretty handy with tools and, I'm mechanically inclined, so I knew exactly what I needed to do. I'd never built a home. I'd never put up drywall. I'd never done anything like that. But just from talking to the neighbors, they were telling me what I needed to do and how I needed to handle it. I was able to figure out, what tools I needed, what supplies I needed. And rather than trying to lift big pieces of drywall, they said, look, just break it apart, put it in 5-gallon buckets, and just take it 1 bucket at a time. It's going to take you forever, but it's better than hurting your back or getting injured or stuff like that. So that's why it took so long, because we had to take it out 5-gallon buckets at a time.
Did you take it out through the window wells?
No, we did not. We just went up the stairs. Probably the heaviest part was taking up these individual planks of wood because they were soaked. So we would take out 4 or 5 planks at a time, and it was a lot of walking up and down the stairwell. But physically, it was exhausting. We were exhausted every night. But, we were resilient, and it didn't take that long. And now that I look back on it, it feels like it didn't take long at all, because, once my landlord came back in and, he saw what we had done, he had the furnace people in right away because it was starting to get cold. I had a gas fireplace upstairs that kept us warm at night, and I had some little portable heaters, so it kept the rooms warm. So that was no big deal. But I said, listen, we got to get the furnace fixed because it's going to start getting cold here real soon. So he came in, he had that replaced. And then he had the drywalls come in around the first week of October, and they had completely, it took them a week to drywall everything and put the texture up. So then they came in and they painted, and I said, listen, I don't want those wood floors down here again, ever again, because if this ever happens again, the carpet's a lot easier. So he picked out a real nice indoor-outdoor carpeting. I said, look, it's a rental property. Come on, you don't need anything nice down here. And he got everything done, and within 3 weeks he had the place back to normal. So I'm very thankful of that.
And people should know that we're actually interviewing you in the basement, and there's the drywall behind you, the fresh drywall.
Absolutely.
The new paint. It looks very nice.
Yeah, it feels like a brand new house.
That's great.
Yeah.
Would your wife affected in any way during the flood?
Well, no. Susan's kind of unique in that she's always happy.
Mm-hmm.
You read about people that have Alzheimer's, advanced Alzheimer's, where they don't recognize their loved ones. They get angry. They get very hostile. They'll throw stuff. Moody, quiet. Susan's not that way at all. She's very happy. She's very friendly. She's sociable. Her issue is she just can't talk in complete sentences. But she's in the now. And so as far as, understanding what's going on around her, she knew it was happening, but, she was very easy she was no different taking care of her during all this disaster as she is today. So she was very easy. She's a very easy person to take care of.
That's great.
Yeah. The only issue was when the toilets were, not working properly. We had to take her outside, and she had to go to the bathroom outside. But that was only for a few days, so it was no big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything you would like to add that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, again, I'd like to just mention how many volunteers were out here. We had church groups out here. We had the military out here. We had the city officials out here. We had the firemen out here. They came by every day checking on us, to make sure that we were okay. We had the Salvation Army out here dropping off water and supplies.
Did they set up a food station for you?
Yes, we had churches out here providing hot meals every day. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
We had hot hamburgers. We had sloppy joes one day. I think somebody brought out some ribs, one of the local restaurants. And then, of course, the churches were out here every day. Every day, while they were cleaning up the mess. Oh, and then the people that were responsible for cleaning up the mess, on the streets, they are unbelievable. I just could not believe. And then the neighbors, they were always asking each other, do you need anything? Do you need any help? You got plenty of food, water, stuff like that. So it just kind of pulled this whole neighborhood together, and that's what was so cool about it. Yeah, so we were very thankful that being from another city, another state, that we were able to get the help that we did.
That's
very
great.
appreciative.
That's great.
Yep.
Well, I think you're a very resilient and resourceful man. And neighbor, it's nice to know you. And thank you very much for this interview.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.